All right, welcome to our second session. We just finished talking about the valuation process. Now, remember the question we asked in our opening remarks as to why do people do valuations? That question basically was meant for us to expose us to the purposes for which valuations are usually done. Most of the valuation that we are going to do would be for one of these purposes. So these are the general comprehensive purposes for which valuations are usually required. What I expect from you is for you to explain to me what each of those purposes mean, or how valuation is connected to each of those purposes. This is quite a simple.
Can you, in short, explain the purpose for servitude?
Servitude.
Yeah, I don't.
You've done the concept of servitude. I gave you the notes. I didn't talk about servitudes because I think I left it for law. You're doing in principles of property law.
Yeah.
You've covered the concept of servitude.
Yeah. So I understand the concept of a servitude, but if you have
valuation.
to evaluate servitude.
Normally, valuation of servitude is, you understand what a servitude is, especially now in personal servitudes. If somebody has a servitude over your property, sometimes you can charge that person for that right that he has over your property. Yes. So then you determine the value of.
Okay, but will that right? If you have the right to ask him money for the use,
yes.
Will that right be stipulated on your deed?
Title, it should be registered. Yes.
Okay, so then it will say this is a servitude, but
yes.
You are.
And it will show exactly on the. Have you looked at the survey diagram?
Yeah.
Survey diagrams normally show the servitudes.
But let's say it's like a panhandle, but it's not a panhandle. That's a servitude over my stand. I'm in front.
Yeah.
So, in what cases can I ask the guy money, and in what cases can't I? Or in all cases?
No. Normally, actually, if there are two types of servitude, there is what they call the prior servitude and a personal servitude. Normally, a personal servitude, a prior servitude rather, that is the servitude that is attached only to land. And what that normally means is, before any land is like subdivided, each and every piece of land should have access. So those servitudes now are put on that land by the surveyor general. Those servitudes you cannot sell them. The servitudes that you can normally sell are the personal servitudes. Like if ESCOM wants to run a power line over agricultural property, that portion of that is going to be taken, so that should be sold. Then you determine. So mostly the type of servitudes that you normally sell are the personal servitudes.
Okay, no, now I understand. Okay.
The priority of those that do exist on the structure plan, they are there legally. I didn't cover with you the whole topic of it's a responsibility of the surveyor. Before he apportions, he creates a stand. He has to make sure that that stand has got access. So that access that is there from the survey side, you cannot deny somebody. You cannot even charge him. It's a provision for that structural plan or for that scheme, so to speak. But for personal servitudes, those you can charge. Yeah. Good question. Anything else amongst the purposes there? Quite straightforward, eh? Please, let's know the purposes of valuation. And why is this very, very important? Because mostly the purpose of valuation will also determine the method of valuation sometimes. The way that we are going to value a property for expropriation purpose is guided by amongst these purposes, basically, there are how many statutory purposes? No, statutory. Expropriation and assessment rates. These two types of valuations are regulated by specific acts. So an expropriation valuation, to do an expropriation valuation, you need to do it according to the Expropriation Act. I believe at this stage you have already done the Expropriation Act in the law on property valuation. So the way you go about doing a valuation for expropriation is going to be different from the way you go about doing an ordinary open market valuation. Yeah. The same with the municipal assessment rates. You only value those properties according to the provisions of the Municipal Rates Act. And that's the reason why you have to cover those two important legislations in the law on property valuation. It's for that purpose. That's where you learn how to do those types of valuations. You do them according to the provisions of those legislations. So purposes of valuation extremely important. Factors determining value of property. This one is also important. Please, let's go and know the concept of dust. For any commodity to have value, any commodity generally speaking, for it to have value, it needs to satisfy those four elements. There must be demand for that property. There must be utility. And that property should be scarce. If it's not scarce, nobody will be willing to spend money on it. And that property should be transferable. So those are the general elements of value. Any property, not a property specific actually, for any commodity to have value, it needs to satisfy those four important elements. Let's know them. Now, strictly speaking, now properties wise, the factors which influence value are grouped in three groups. You should be able to give me an intelligent discussion on the factors which influence value of property as well. One of the factors that influence value of property are the physical characteristics of the property. And under physical characteristics, you can talk about everything to do with the physical nature of that property. That's the shape, the size, the topography, so quality, depending on the type of property. So physical characteristics do play a role in the value of the property. Secondly, will be your environmental characteristics. The location, the environment in which your property is situated has an effect on the value of that property. You know that. And most importantly, will be now the rights of the property. The rights of the property, and by rights of the property we know what it means basically, is the rights, the utilization of that property according to the planning laws, the town planning scheme. Those are the things which really give value to a property.
When I did my evaluation report, that the house that I valued was a residential house, and it was zoned for residential, but it had the, I don't know what you call it, it had the opportunity, like in the zoning scheme, it said that there is potential to make that stand business stand.
Yeah.
Because it was in a part of town that it can be all
rezoned.
Okay.
So basically that's what they call potential. So,
But how do, like now it's a residential stand, but if you take in consideration for future, you can make
Yeah.
it a business. Can you add 5,000 rand to
Yeah.
the,
you can add a premium for that because
but
of
how
its
do you
potential.
determine that?
The exact amount. It's not given. It's not like it's now up to you. Use your own judgment. So what you need to do now, remember in your valuation report structure, there is a section which talks about the highest and best use.
Yeah, I know, but
So that's the section where you now need to talk about the current use and the potential use. So know the definition of highest and best use. Highest and best use is a very, very important principle in valuation. Simply put, highest and best use is that use of the property which results in the most optimum value for a property. Highest and best use is the use of the property which results in the best or the highest present value of the property. So now what normally happens is when you are valuing a property, you always assume the highest and best use of the property. You need to value it according to its highest and best use. So if you find that the property is not being used, the current use is not its highest and best use, then you reflect within your report that this property is not being used to its highest and best use. The highest and best use could be A, B, C, D. So then the difference between the present use of a property and its highest and best use is the potential. So that property has got potential to be taken further up to enhance its value to its highest and best use. So what you do in that instance is, however, for you to verify that highest and best use, you need to do further investigation. One of the investigations that you need to do is the legal limitations on that property. And the property-wise, it's all about the potential for that property to be rezoned. So if, like you are saying, you already had information at your disposal that there is possibility of this property being rezoned, then you can value that property. Even if it's a residential on that time, you can value it higher than other residential properties because of that potential that it has. That's the way. So usually as a terminology, as a principle, you always value your property to the highest and best use. So if the property has unutilized potential, you indicate that in your report and factor that in your valuation report. You can give a value to that unutilized potential. However, that potential should not be speculative. It has to be informed by your further research to see exactly if actually indeed that potential is physically and legally practical. Okay. Yeah. So the concept of highest and best use is also limited by 3 criteria. That use which you are going to assume to be the highest and best use needs to be legally permissible and physically possible and economically viable, and then maximally productive. Those are the 3 criteria which define the concept of highest and best use. Otherwise, highest and best use is not like, should not be speculative. It should be based on further market research for you to establish whether indeed that use that you are assuming is possible. Okay. So did you indicate that in your report?
yeah, but I didn't, like, I think I showed the reasons that it can be rezoned, but
Yeah.
that's the only information that I
That you indicate. Yeah.
indicated, and then I said, so there is a possibility for a
For-
higher price
yeah.
or whatever.
That's good enough.
Yeah,
Mm.
but I didn't know how to.
How to factor that in value or
Yeah.
the what premium. That is very, very subjective though. Okay. So that's let's ladies and gentlemen, please let's honor the factors which influence value of property. Okay. So this those are the factors that influence value of property. Usually, I always recommend that you discuss those factors in those three groups: the physical characteristics of the property, the environmental characteristics, the environment in which your property falls, and the rights of the property. Okay. So basically, that's the general discussion on the general principles of property valuation. That's where the general principles of property valuation ends. You need to know. I hope at the end of this year we've learned those few things. We know exactly, first and foremost, what value is, the concept of value. We have a good understanding of the concept of value. Know the different types of value. Most importantly, know what market value is when we talk about property. Know exactly the purposes for which valuations are done. Why do people require valuations to be done? Know exactly the process you need to go through when doing a valuation. Know the valuation process. And lastly, know exactly the factors which influence value of property. When you are out there doing your inspection, what are the things that you are going to be looking out for? Those things which are going to influence that last price that you're going to put, or that last figure that you're going to put on that property of yours. Okay. So that is basically what is covered in the general principles of property valuation. Any question? Overview. All right, next now is, we looked at the methods of valuation. And I gave you the complete set of the 5 methods of valuation. And in this, on this topic, I think I indicated as first years, we need to know the comparable sales method of valuation, the theory of the comparable sales method of valuation, in and out. Also, we need to know the theory of the income method of valuation, in and out. We also need to know the theory of the cost method of valuation. So in short, at this stage, I expect all of us to know the theory of all the 5 methods of valuation, but practically know only the first 2. Practically, we have only done the comparable sales and the income method. The rest of the methods, you're going to learn about them in the coming years. But at this stage, we should please know the comparable sales method and know the income method of valuation. Most of your exam questions are about the methods of valuation, because valuation is about methods of valuation, basically. That's why we spend all the time talking about methods of valuation. As a valuer, all you need to know is, you know a specific method of valuation and know how to apply that method to what type of properties. Then you can arguably say you can do a valuation of any property. So that's how it goes. Know the comparable sales method, know the income method of valuation. Okay. From there, I think that's where on the methods of valuation, that's where this slide comes in. So these are basically all 5 methods of valuation. Please go and revise this slide. It gives you all the theories of the methods of valuation. And also read your textbook. about the methods of valuation. Should be able to tell the advantages and disadvantages of the comparable sales method. All the methods, in short, please. Let's go and do a detailed discussion of the methods. Okay. So now that you know the methods of valuation, the next important assignment is now for you to prepare a valuation report. So know the requirements of a valuation report, the way we cover them. Know the purpose of a valuation report is to convey information. And this is where I was saying, I'll talk about this. And I was saying, I think all of you people, you did your valuation reports very, very, very well. And that shows me that you have a good understanding of the evaluation, the contents of the evaluation report. For those that may still have some questions, I gave you some minimum requirements for evaluation report, which I think all of you followed very, very well. And on that aspect, I think I'm extremely impressed with all the way you wrote your evaluation report. It's always good that you start with that right from the first year. The way you did it is the same way that you are going to be doing evaluation report. The only thing that is going to differ now going forward is we are going to be doing evaluation reports for different types of properties. But the structure and the content and what needs to be covered on the specific sections is basically the same. It's just the different information that you're going to require if you are looking at a different property. Okay. So just know a few things about the characteristics of a good report. Remember, a good report is all about, evaluation report is all about communicating. You are communicating your research and your findings and your analysis to your client. So what we normally say under that is make sure that you write your evaluation report in very simple language that your client may understand. Remember, your client may not be technically knowledgeable like you. So break down, avoid a lot of technical jargon in your evaluation reports. Make it as plain or as simple for your client as possible. So that's what we refer to efficient communication. Secondly, your evaluation report must be complete, meaning all the important sections of the evaluation report need to be adequately covered. All these important sections need to be adequately covered. When we talk about the evaluation being credible, we said you as a valuer, you do not create value. So you are basing that conclusion on information. So credibility simply refers to your ability to substantiate or to support your conclusion with concrete market evidence. That is what gives your evaluation report credibility. Support your conclusions with market evidence. Then the evaluation must have a logical sequence. Yes, the evaluation report should follow a logical sequence. There must be an introduction and the body and the conclusion. So don't start with a conclusion and then the introduction in the middle and like that. No. So it has to be structured in a good way, in a logical sequence, which is easier for the next person to follow. Okay. I'm not going to talk about the content of the evaluation report. You all know that one very well. If you don't, please refer to the handout which I gave you. Why I'm so confident that you all know, I'm basing that on the way that you wrote your evaluation reports. You all have a basic understanding of the contents of the evaluation report, and you know what needs to be covered. If you are in doubt, please just refer to the notes that I've already uploaded for you. Okay. So that is the evaluation report. Okay. That's the end of that discussion. Do you have any question on that one? I don't. That we should be fine. The next important, you see now what we have so far been looking at is general theory and principles of property valuation. So the next part of this subject that you need to now know is information search. Where do you as a valuer get information in order to complete your valuation process? So that is basically now what we covered, and those 4 headings. There are basically 3 offices that you need to visit in order to get property related information. One of those offices is the deeds office. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation here. So know exactly what information you need to get from the office from the deeds office, so to speak. Know the information you need to get from the deeds office and the information you need to get from the Surveyor General's office. You can refer to your notes on all those things. Surveyor General's office, know the information you need to get from there, as well as the local authority. These are the public institutional offices where you need to get most property related information. Okay. The local authority. The local authority, basically the municipality, those are the people that have got, that's the institution which has got jurisdiction over all the properties which fall within their boundaries. Yes, please.
If you value agricultural land, it doesn't fall under local authority, landbouw, or what do they call
Town planning scheme.
Yeah, but the Department van Agriculture, Department of, do you get information from them then?
What information? What specific information area?
Like you want information about the
sizes of the property?
No, that will get from the surveyors, but the information that you generally get from the local authority, if you
okay.
are in
an urban area.
Urban area.
Yeah. No, I think for agricultural purposes, most of the information you need for agricultural properties, you can get it from the deeds office. Yeah, because the farms are not subjected to local authority jurisdiction, and they are not subjected to the town planning schemes. Yeah.
Let's say I have a farm and I want to sell it to a developer that wants to do a township.
Yes.
So obviously the farm will have a greater value than the one that can't be. But where do you get information, or will it be possible or not?
Information about that farm.
Yeah, I want to make it a township.
Yes.
But where do I get information, or will it be possible or will it not be possible?
Okay. Township development is basically, you're going to talk about that in your third year. Township development is a very, very common phenomenon around here. we've seen basically that is one way in which mostly land that is initially zoned for agriculture is converted now into residential and then incorporated mostly into urban areas. Oftentimes, townships are formed on those lands which are usually on the urban peripheries, closer to the urban boundaries. Then they get incorporated. Once it's developed into a township, then it gets incorporated into the urban area. So what you need to do when you are doing, the first things you need to establish first, if you have identified any piece that is suitable for probably a township, firstly you need to verify if there is a possibility of that land being rezoned.
Okay.
Yes.
But where can you find that out from local authority?
Yes, that one from the closest local authority, yes.
Okay.
You get that from the closest local authority.
Okay,
The
so
possibility of being rezoned, and because if once that township is developed, it's going to be part of the local authority.
Okay, so you'll get that information from the closest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So local authority is another extremely important public office where you need to get information. And under this, the way that local authorities regulate land use is through the town planning schemes. So I want you to know exactly the purpose of a town planning scheme. This is very important. Know the purpose of town planning scheme. And most importantly, know the town planning scheme clauses, and then the regulations which are used to determine the land utilization. The regulation of the erection of buildings, know them very well, which are discussed under the control factors in town planning schemes. Control factors in town planning schemes, very well covered in the textbook, and extremely important section of this subject. So I expect you to know this slide, know the theory, be able to define those control factors, and also be able to, you should know exactly how these control factors practically work to determine the land that can be utilized. So those calculations that we have done, and they are very well covered in this book. Please go through them. I gave you one calculation straight from the book in June, and most of us got lost. Make sure you don't get lost twice. Yeah. So this is a very, very important topic. Go and revise it. Both the theory and the practical applications. Okay. So that is information on information searches. Basically now we're talking about three important offices that evaluate, if anything, if you do know some people in those three offices whereby you can just pick a phone call if you are looking for information and get assistance. Know where the deeds office is, know where your Surveyor General office is, know where the local authority is, and know exactly what type of information you need from those three offices.
What do you mean by know where the offices is like?
I'm just talking figuratively, because all I need to know is, probably I should have said, know what information you need from the deeds office.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you don't need to know it physically.
Okay.
It's all about knowing the information you need from those three different offices. Okay. So that is the information search. Those three offices are extremely important. Then, under that information search, please I'm not going to test you on this one, but I just want you to know the concept of servitudes also. Servitudes are very, very important to valuers. You know exactly that most servitudes actually are burdens on properties. So the reason why I talk about it in valuation is so that you are aware. Servitudes, in as much as servitudes are a legal principle, because it's a right to the land. So you need to be aware of their existence on property. If you are valuing a property which is burdened by a servitude, and you are using a comparable which does not have a servitude, you need to know how to make proper adjustments for those differences. Because most servitudes on land are burdens, meaning they reduce the value of the property. Servitudes are very, very common, especially if you are talking about agricultural properties. A property that has got a servitude, its value is going to be affected negatively. So you need to be aware of the presence of servitudes. And how do you see that your property has got a servitude? Your survey diagram will show the existence of servitude. In this book, there is a sample of a survey diagram. Look at it and see exactly how servitudes are indicated. So whichever property you are going to be valuing, if there is a servitude, pay attention to those servitudes. And then interpret exactly, make a detailed analysis to see how that servitude will impact on the value of that land. So that is extremely important. So the concept of servitude, that's the reason why I gave you all these, but I'm not going to test you on servitude this time, but you just need to know about them. Okay. So the next, that is what we did in the, I think up to the second term. What else did we look at? Okay. And lastly now, in the last section, we were talking about the supply and demand for property. Please let us all go and revise and know exactly that chapter as well. Supply and demand for property. Know exactly the factors which influence this demand for property, and know exactly the factors which influence the demand for property. Go and revise that chapter as well. That having been said, then the next other major topic that I need to bring to your attention is this one. And this is our last topic of discussion for the day. The income method of valuation. We did this in our last block session. And all I want is for you to know the theory of the income method of valuation and know the practical application of the income method of valuation. There is possibly going to be a question, a practical question on the income method of valuation. So you should know how to at least value a simple commercial property. At this stage, we should know. It's all about the valuation process. When you are valuing, for any method of valuation, what is important is for you to know when do you use this method, to which type of properties do you apply this method, and then know exactly the process that you go through when using that specific method of valuation. Okay. So mostly, please remember the 5 steps valuation process. So when you are valuing that commercial property of yours, first and foremost, you determine the gross annual income for that property, then the annual expenses related to the property, subtract your expenses from your income to get your net income, then choose a suitable capitalization rate, then you divide your net income by a cap rate. You get the value of the property. It's as simple as that. And remember, for the whole of next year, you are going to be dealing with commercial valuations. So what I've given you on this is basically introductory information. You are going to go into more deep depth on the income method of valuation in the coming year. So for now, it's purely introductory and simple income cap method. Do you have a question?
That gross annual income, what is that? What does the gross income mean?
Gross income, that's the income which that property now generates.
So it's not the income that it can possibly generate.
No, it's the income which it generates now, the contractual income.
So if you have a building with 40
units.
And there's only 10 units that are rented out at the moment, you'll only use that
No.
thing.
No. You have to, because that building is existing, you have to value, you now need to calculate the building, you assume the property is fully let. Then for those vacancies, you need to make a provision for vacancies. Otherwise, for the building, you are going to assume it's fully let. You cannot only value it for those 10, only 10 that are occupied now. So you are going to value it as if it is fully occupied, then make provision for vacancies.
Okay, so if you use this method, you use it as if it is
Fully occupied. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Then make a provision for vacancies.
Okay, how do you do that?
You remember, you missed,
sorry.
yeah, you missed in the example that, so please, for the sake of those that are not in class, please go and revise the income method of valuation. Know exactly how it works, know the theory, and know the practice. At the end of this, I've given you a class exercise, Leon.
Okay.
And this class exercise, I also gave you the solution to it. That's where I explained how the vacancies should be worked out.
Okay. I'll go and do it.
Yeah, please just go and look on
Okay.
Blackboard in the video of the last session. This is a simple exercise. Probably I will decide something similar to that could be in the test. But the basic procedure that you need to follow is, that's the basic valuation process. First and foremost, determine the potential income of your property. Then look at all the property-related expenses for the property. Subtract the expenses from the income, from the gross, to get your net income. Then choose an appropriate capitalization rate. And then the capitalization formula, you know it, market value of the property is equal to the net income divided by its capitalization rate. That gives you the market value of the property.
Okay, you probably on Blackboard already explained that as well, but how do you get the cap rate?
Cap rate, I also explained where the cap rate normally comes from. Cap rate, you are going to get it from the sale of other properties. So it's all about the capitalization formula. I'll the board is that other side. You look at the capitalization formula. Net income of a property, the market value of a property is going to be determined by net income divided by capitalization rate. For academic purposes, I'm going to give you a capitalization rate. Otherwise, practically speaking, the capitalization rate comes from the market. We have to do an analysis of other properties which have sold to establish exactly how much those properties sold to come up with the capitalization rate which those properties did achieve. Okay. So if you are using the capitalization formula where net income is equal to, market value is equal to net income divided by cap rate. The capitalization rate, maybe.
Can you give us that board?
Let me even